6 minutes! We have 6 minutes! The fire dispatcher screamed over the phone. The building will be completely engulfed in smoke. 45 elderly people, wheelchairs, those who couldn't walk, time racing against death itself, and 70-year-old Grandma Maggie suddenly began to move. But these weren't normal movements for a 70-year-old woman. These commands weren't normal. The sweet grandmother who'd been playing bingo and handing out candy for 3 years had suddenly transformed into someone completely different. Welcome to Silent Warriors. Comment what city you're watching from. And if you want to learn this woman's true identity, hit that subscribe button, because this story has 3 shocking secrets. First secret, this woman lived at sea for 21 years. Second secret, her hands saved 5,000 sailors' lives. Third secret, you'll only learn at the end of this video. But first, I need to tell you the story of these abnormal hands, because these hands learned to fight fires in very different places. Margaret Torres was 70 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, with silver hair always carefully styled, a gentle smile, and warm eyes that made her Sunset Manor's most beloved volunteer. For 3 years, every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m., she'd arrive to play bingo with elderly residents, do crafts, and listen to their stories. Everyone saw her as a retired teacher, calm, patient, filled with love for elderly people. The residents' families adored her because Margaret ensured their loved ones were happy. Margaret's daily routine was always the same. She'd arrive at 9 a.m., greet residents in the activity room, and first serve coffee. Then, she'd gently explain the day's plans: bingo, crafts, story reading, sometimes singing old songs. The residents loved her dearly. 85-year-old Harold constantly asked, "Has Grandma Maggie arrived?" 78-year-old Rose would hold Margaret's hand and say, "You're our angel." 82-year-old Frank would praise her, "This lady is wonderful. She knows everything." Margaret's knowledge was indeed extensive. She understood residents' health problems, had insights about medications, and knew what to do in emergencies. Nurses consulted her because she related so well to elderly people. But nobody wondered why Margaret was so calm, why she never panicked, why she always knew how to act in every emergency. They just thought she was an experienced woman. The small items Margaret carried in her bag didn't draw attention either. She always had a small flashlight, a basic first aid kit, and strangely organized small tools. "I like to always be prepared," she'd say if anyone asked. The only valuable possession in Margaret's home was faded photographs and medals stored in an old wooden box. But she'd never shown this box to anyone. In this box lay the real evidence of who Margaret Torres truly was. In daily life, Margaret was extremely modest. She lived in a small apartment, wore simple clothes, tried not to draw attention, but every minute spent at the nursing home was what kept her alive, because the elderly people here were the ones she'd sworn to protect. Margaret Torres was born in 1954, a small-town girl with big dreams. When she joined the Navy at 19, her family didn't understand, but Margaret felt a purpose. She completed basic training with perfect grades. She especially stood out in emergency response training. Her instructors directed her toward becoming a fire safety specialist. Her first assignment was at Norfolk Naval Base. Here she learned fire safety procedures and prepared emergency evacuation plans. But she would gain her real expertise at sea. In 1976, she was assigned to the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier. This massive ship housed 5,000 sailors. Margaret's job was to ensure fire safety on the ship. On aircraft carriers, fire was the greatest fear because there was nowhere to escape in the middle of the ocean. Her first major test came in 1978. A fire in the engine room was spreading rapidly. Margaret was only 24 that day, but she commanded the firefighting crew. After an 18-hour battle, the fire was brought under control. There were no casualties. This incident defined Margaret's career. It made her one of the youngest fire safety specialists in naval history. For the next 20 years, she served in the most dangerous missions in the Pacific. Her second major incident was in 1983 aboard the USS Kitty Hawk. This time it was a hangar fire with fuel tanks in danger. Margaret's quick decisions and expert crew management prevented the ship from sinking. She saved 3,000 sailors' lives. Margaret's expertise wasn't just firefighting. Emergency evacuation procedures, panic management, crowd coordination in confined spaces, these were skills that would serve her well in the nursing home. Her third and biggest test came in 1991. She was serving on the USS Missouri during the Gulf War. After an enemy attack, a fire broke out approaching the ship's ammunition depot. Margaret stopped the fire and saved the ship in a breathtaking 12-hour operation. This incident earned her the Navy Medal. But the real reward was that 2,800 young sailors could return home. When Margaret retired in 1995, she tried to adapt to civilian life, but peacetime was too quiet for her. PTSD, adjustment problems, feelings of purposelessness, like many veterans, she went through a difficult process. Starting as a volunteer at Sunset Manor in 2021 wasn't by chance. Elderly people needed protection, and Margaret knew nothing but protecting. That Tuesday morning began like any other. Margaret arrived at 9, had coffee with residents, planned the day's activities. The activity room was full. 23 residents were preparing to play bingo. Harold sat in his favorite corner in his wheelchair. Rose was distributing candies from her purse. Frank was telling his old naval stories again. Margaret was calm and organized as always. She was distributing bingo cards, preparing numbers, making sure everyone was comfortable. It was 10:30 and everything was normal. Margaret was the first to smell smoke. Her nose was trained for fire. This scent was electrical fire, and it was nearby. Others hadn't noticed yet, but Margaret stood up. She walked to the activity room door and checked the corridor. She saw light smoke coming from the electrical room. Her heart raced, but there was no sign of panic on her face. She acted with 30 years of experience. First, she pulled the fire alarm. Then, she called emergency services. There's an electrical fire at Sunset Manor nursing home. 45 residents need evacuation. Send emergency fire and ambulance immediately. When the alarm sound filled the building, panic began. Young nurses were confused about what to do. Residents looked around fearfully. Smoke was now beginning to enter the activity room from the corridor. Margaret assessed the situation. 23 residents in this room, 22 residents in other rooms, total 45 people. Most in wheelchairs, some unable to walk, all elderly and fragile. The main exit was filled with smoke. The fire door could be used but would be slow. Margaret began making plans in her mind. "Everyone stay calm," she raised her voice. It was an authoritative but reassuring tone. "Everything is under control. Nobody move until I tell you." The residents felt the confidence in Margaret's voice and calmed down, but the young nurses were still panicking. "Margaret, what are we going to do? The smoke is spreading so fast!" screamed 25-year-old nurse Jessica. Margaret turned to her. Her eyes held the composure of 30 years. "Jessica, can you breathe? Yes? Then listen to me and do exactly what I say." In Margaret's mind was the fire on USS Enterprise during the night shift. 300 sailors trapped in narrow corridors, smoke everywhere, panic at its peak. That night, Margaret's leadership had saved everyone. Now she applied the same principles. "Priority order," she commanded. "Wheelchair residents first, then those with mobility difficulties, healthy ones last." Nurse Jessica didn't understand. "Margaret, isn't everyone trying to get out at the same time? Number that creates complete panic and nobody gets out. First, we'll get the most vulnerable to safety." Margaret went to Harold's wheelchair. "Harold, I'm going to take you to a safe place. Don't worry." Harold looked into Margaret's eyes. "Grandma Maggie, I'm not scared. I'm safe when you're here." Margaret smiled, but her heart ached. How much this old man trusted her. She had to deserve that trust. Smoke was now filling the activity room. Visibility was decreasing. Breathing was becoming difficult. Margaret had to make quick decisions. "Jessica, open the fire door. We'll exit to the courtyard through there." Jessica ran to the fire door but couldn't open it. She was in panic mode. Margaret approached her. "Jessica, breathe. Pull the red bar above the door down. Be strong." Jessica drew strength from Margaret's calmness and opened the door. Fresh air came in. "Now listen," Margaret addressed all the nurses. "I'll give evacuation orders. Each of you will care for one resident. Nobody will panic." 25-year-old nurse Mike asked, "Margaret, shouldn't we wait for the fire department to arrive?" Margaret gave him a sharp look. "Mike, The fire department is 8 minutes away. This building will be completely filled with smoke in 4 minutes. We're getting out now." Mike noticed the authority in Margaret's tone. This wasn't how a normal nursing home volunteer spoke. Margaret initiated the evacuation operation. First, she evacuated Harold and the other 6 wheelchair residents. Then, 8 people using walkers. She gave clear instructions to nurses for each group. Help them breathe. Talk to the residents. Comfort them. You're not in a hurry, but don't stop. The smoke was getting thicker. Margaret was having trouble breathing, but didn't stop. She'd worked in worse conditions on ships. While evacuating the last group of residents, 82-year-old Frank came to Margaret's side. "Ma'am, are you a sailor?" Margaret was surprised. "Why do you ask, Frank?" "Because this way of giving commands, this composure." "I'm also a former sailor. I recognize it." Margaret smiled. "We'll talk later, Frank. Let's get out now." When the last resident was evacuated, Margaret went back into the building. The nurses were surprised. "Margaret, where are you going?" Jessica screamed. "To check the residents on the 2nd floor. But it's too dangerous." Margaret stopped. "Jessica, there are 22 more people up there. I won't abandon them." Margaret went up to the 2nd floor. The smoke was very thick, but her experienced eyes could find the way. She checked every room one by one. In room 201, 87-year-old Ethel had remained frozen in her bed. Fear had paralyzed her. Margaret approached her. "Ethel, I'm Grandma Maggie. I'm going to take you to a safe place." When Ethel saw Margaret's face, she calmed down. "Maggie, I'm scared." "I know, sweetie, but I'm here. Everything will be fine." Margaret lifted Ethel into her arms. Despite being 70 years old, her body strength was still strong from the heavy work on ships. In room 205, 79-year-old George with dementia was lost in the darkness. Margaret calmed him and took him to safety. During her final check, Margaret assessed the structural condition of the building. The fire had started from an electrical system malfunction, but had now spread to wall insulation. The building would be in serious danger within 10 minutes. After Margaret evacuated the last resident, she exited the building. Just then, fire sirens were heard. Fire Captain Rodriguez approached Margaret. "Ma'am, are you the person who organized this evacuation?" "Yes." 45 people evacuated without any injuries. This is a perfect operation. How did you manage it?" Margaret hesitated. She'd been avoiding this question for 3 years. "Experience," she said simply. Captain Rodriguez continued. "Ma'am, I've been a firefighter for 20 years. This kind of organization requires professional training." "Where did you get your training?" Margaret took out her old ID card from her bag. Faded, worn, but still readable. "Petty Officer Margaret Torres, U.S. Navy Fire Safety Specialist, 1974 to 1995. Captain Rodriguez froze. Naval Fire Safety Specialist was legendary expertise. "Are you really a naval fire specialist?" asked Captain Rodriguez. "Retired specialist," Margaret corrected. "Which ships did you serve on?" "Enterprise, Kitty Hawk, Missouri." Captain Rodriguez's eyes widened. These ships were the most famous aircraft carriers in naval history. "Ma'am, you're a legend. I've read about the fire operations on these ships. You're a real hero." Margaret was uncomfortable. "I just did my job." At that moment, nursing home director Mrs. Patterson approached. "Margaret, what is Captain Rodriguez saying? Do you have a naval background?" Margaret nodded. "I served for 21 years. But you're a nursing home volunteer." "Now I am. But I used to be a fire safety specialist on ships." Mrs. Patterson was shocked. "Margaret, why did you never mention it?" "Because it wasn't important. I just wanted to spend time with elderly people." Captain Rodriguez intervened. "Mrs. Patterson, Margaret Torres is one of the most famous fire specialists in naval history. Her operation on USS Missouri is legendary." Mrs. Patterson looked at Margaret with amazement. "Margaret, are you a real war hero?" "I'm a retired sailor. Now I'm also a nursing home volunteer." At that moment, residents gathered around Margaret. Harold approached in his wheelchair. "Grandma Maggie, this gentleman is calling you a hero. Is this true?" Margaret knelt beside Harold. "Harold, I'm just someone who protects you. That's enough." Rose hugged Margaret, crying. "You saved our lives, Maggie." Frank was smiling. I knew it. I knew you were a sailor. The fire news received great attention in local media. Secret hero, nursing home volunteer, turns out to be naval legend, headlines were published. But Margaret gave no interviews, didn't appear on cameras. The next day she came to the nursing home on time again. Residents now looked at her with different eyes. But Margaret was still the same Grandma Maggie, just no longer hidden. Mrs. Patterson called Margaret to her office. Margaret, after learning about your background, I want to offer you a different proposal. What kind of proposal? I want you to work as a security coordinator, fire safety, emergency plans, staff training. Margaret thought, does this mean I won't be able to spend time with residents anymore? Quite the opposite. You'll both ensure their safety and spend time with them. Margaret accepted, but with one condition. I still want to be called Grandma Maggie. Weeks later, Margaret also began consulting at other nursing homes in the city. Fire safety protocols, staff training, emergency plans. Harold asked her one day, Maggie, do you miss naval life? Margaret held Harold's hand. Harold, naval service never ends. It just continues in different ways. What do you mean? I served 5,000 sailors on ships. Now here I serve 45 elderly people. The mission is the same. Protecting people, Rose asked curiously. So who were there in your life before us? Margaret smiled. People like you, Rose. People who needed protection. Valuable, loved people. 6 months later, Margaret was working as both security coordinator and activity organizer. She did security checks in the morning, played bingo with residents in the afternoon. Frank told her one day, Margaret, you're both a warrior and a protector. No, Frank, I'm just someone who loves to serve. Margaret now had old naval photographs on her desk. Residents looked at these and asked questions. Margaret told modest stories. Are these ships very big? Asked Ethel. Yes, Ethel. But the most important thing was the people inside, just like this nursing home. Sunset Manor was now the safest nursing home in the city. But most importantly, thanks to Margaret, it was also the happiest. Because real heroes don't have to wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear gloves and call bingo numbers. And protecting 45 elderly people's lives is as valuable as protecting 5,000 sailors' lives. Margaret Torres was no longer hidden, but her mission was the same, protecting people who needed protection. And Harold still asked every morning when he saw her, has Grandma Maggie arrived? Because some things never changed. Margaret's love, devotion, and protective instinct. Subscribe to Silent Warriors for more stories of hidden heroes.